Yes. Okay. Again,
Let me start this.
we're happy to begin our class. It just took a little while. We had some technical difficulty. If anyone was waiting in the audience, we apologize. We're still getting the technology correct. So I'd like to, begin with, by sharing with everyone that, we always try to promote the idea of people giving tzedakah, charity. We're not saying to wear, that's obviously up to what your soul calls you to. I just want to share just what, an easy way to do it is there's a Pushka app, Chabad.org has a Pushka app. You get right on a phone and you can give charity directly from your phone. Here is the Pushka app. Just to show you. See, it comes on. It's really neat. And then, I press a button and I give, and and that's that. It's very, very easy. So, and I find that having a Pushka app on my phone, means that I'm able to do the mitzvah of tzedakah more frequently, and it's it's a very satisfying experience. Besides a huge mitzvah, of course. Okay, so for those who are new, we are learning from this book, Shomer Emunim, the Introduction to Kabbalah by Rabbi Yosef Ergaz, with translation, commentary, and Kabbalah Overview by Avinoam Fraenkel. We also are streaming on Clubhouse. Admittedly, it's an experiment. We don't know if it'll work. We're trying, so that those who want to more actively participate can ask questions more directly or make comments more directly without actually having to type in to the chat. But we'll see how it goes because I'm not sure. Okay. So we are on which page number we are on? We are on page 827. The bottom paragraph of the page. And we were talking about, we're talking about in general the topic of divine providence and different views about how it works. And right now, Avinoam Fraenkel is examining the Arizal's view, the Lurianic view. And from the perspective of the Lurianic view, there is there are two levels that are going on at once. There's a basic general level, which and then there's a specific level. The basic general level is that a public kind of divine providence that applies to everyone, everything equally. Like the sun arises in the morning for everyone. It doesn't matter what moral level they're at, whoever they are. The sun rises in the morning. The sun sets at night for everyone, right? If you live in a particular part of the world, you will get 4 seasons. That will happen for everyone. There's a general availability of food. There's a general availability of health. There's a general availability in certain regions and certain times. That will apply to everyone. That pretty much apply to everyone. So that's called hashgacha klalit, which means the general divine supervision. Then there's a level of divine supervision that's enhanced by people's behavior, and that's called hashgacha pratit, which is, depending on who the person is and how the person behaves, that will change. So if a person is a very righteous person, so the person will get a little extra help from God. Now, God is equally aware of everything. So, whether we're talking about the general hashgacha, with general divine supervision, or specific individualized divine supervision, that doesn't change God's awareness. God is aware of everything equally. We're talking about, how God interacts with the person in an open and revealed way. So, and there, so you have parts of the world, let's say, that have a higher state of divine supervision. For example, I believe that the land of Israel has a higher state of divine supervision than, let's say, places outside the land of Israel, a more revealed level. Doesn't mean that God, we're not talking about here God's awareness. God's awareness is equal at all times. And in a hidden way, there's always individual divine supervision. It's just talking about what's open, what's revealed. So we spoke about how, when you have general divine supervision, for example, it may seem like there's divine supervision of a species, but the individual entities of the species, there isn't necessarily individual divine supervision of it. Like, for example, you take a school of fish. So maybe the school as a whole has open divine supervision, but the individual fish, not necessarily. Only in its relation to the whole. So what we discussed is that the general divine supervision, that comes more or less from the igulim. That's the meaning the spherical sphirot, which he discussed earlier in the book, which is and they're spherical because they have to do with the cycles of nature, the cycles of life. The cycles of life are part of the general divine supervision, like the cycles of the sun, the cycles of the moon, the stars, the planets, the seasons. This is all general divine supervision. And then there is like this miracle that happens for this very saintly person. That's clearly, in the category of individual divine supervision. That comes from the linear sfirot, where there's a higher state of tikkun, a higher state of repair, where those sfirot are more integrated. They're in a state of integrated diversity. When you're in a state of integrated diversity, every detail actually counts more, because the diversity is part of the integration. It's like we say a Sefer Torah, a Torah scroll, right? If it's missing one letter, the whole thing is invalid. You can't say, okay, well, in that portion of the Torah scroll that we read 2 Sabbaths ago, there was a missing letter. But you know what? We're reading this week. There's no missing letter, so we could read from it. No, the whole scroll is invalid, because the whole and the details weigh equally in this integrated unity, which actually is a reflection of God's infinity, if you think about it. Because with God's infinity, small and large doesn't matter. General and details don't matter, because infinity is infinity. So the detail is as important as the whole. This is, by the way, how we know that God cares about each individual person, right? Everyone could have a direct connection with God, because in that integrated state of God's true infinity, there's the details as important as the whole. So you as an individual detail is important as the whole. So this is kind of what we're going through. So the more you have tikkun, which means cosmic repair, the more the spiritual levels are highly integrated, and the more the details really matter. There's the distinction between the details and the whole, is blurred because the whole is made from the details. The whole is not whole without the details. So with that introduction in mind, let's go to the bottom of page 827. The implication is that this divine providence is always applied in a relative context. When applied to a lower level structure, partsuf, the relative spherical sfirot, it always applies in general terms, to the relative group of separate entities, even if that group has some commonality. Exactly as I said, So even if the group has commonality between the different parts, but it's going to be revealed. God's supervision is going to be revealed in a general sense. However, when applied to a higher level structure, spiritual structure, the relative level of linear sfirot, it applies to very specific terms to every last aspect of the integrated, unified whole ecosystem of the larger collective. The structure of linear sfirot is analogously depicted as an integrated whole structure of man. So there is, doesn't literally mean that's man, but it's the spiritual template upon which humanity was built on, and you could see actually this integrated unity in your body. Just very simply, every cell has the entire genetic code of your whole body. Just as a just for starters, that's an expression of this. So we have a saying, "Mi besori achaza eloka." It's from the book of Job. From my flesh I perceive divinity. And we could use the human body and the human being, both the biological aspect and the psychological aspect, as parables to understand higher spiritual concepts. So you could take a look at the body and look at the integration of the body, the human body, to appreciate, the divine integration that we're talking about that occurs with cosmic repair. Now, obviously, the human body is not the ultimate state of it, because if it were, we wouldn't require the resurrection. The reason we require the resurrection is because we're only at an early stage of it, a primitive stage of it compared to what will be. So now top of page 828. Therefore, divine providence, when applied to human, will always be analogously applied to every human being and to his or her ecosystem. This contrasts with the disparate group of underlying components that comprise a human being, including the inanimate, meaning let's say the minerals that run through our bodies, the plant, that's our power of growth, the animal life, meaning our capacity to move around the way, let's say, an animal would, and that relative to integrated level of humanity of a human being are unintegrated on the relative level of the spherical sfirot, thereby only subject to divine providence at a group level. So, in other words, the higher part of us is what's shares more in the integration than the lower part. I want to clarify, Cindy. I'm going to get to your question, your comment in a minute, but give me a second. I want to clarify very clearly that that this is on a relative scale. In other words, there are higher and higher levels of integration, and compared to the previous level, the of integration, there's no integration at all. What you called integration yesterday is not integration today. So because there's a spiritual evolution going on. And in the process of the spiritual evolution, yesterday's integration is no longer considered integrated. So that's important not to get too stuck up on symbols. They call it spherical sphere, linear sphere, in a certain sense. They're there to show something, but the point is that yesterday's linear sphere could be today's spherical sphere, because we've reached a more integrated state and there's more individual divine supervision. And even within the human being, there are levels and levels in the human being. Some are more integrated than others. The state, so let's see what Cindy says. It is said that there is an angel for each blade of grass. How is there divine providence to animals only in groups? Oh, first thing is the angel is there to give it life. The angel means that it has a soul. That's really what it means. It has a soul of some sort, and that doesn't take away from that there's general divine supervision. There's nothing here in this world that doesn't have a spiritual counterpart. So that angel you're referring to, Cindy, is the spiritual counterpart of the blade of grass. But the level of divine supervision will depend on, other factors, the degree of integration. And the truth be told is that there'll be a day when the grass will be also in a higher state of integration. It's it's only a matter of time. This is part of how the spiritual evolution flows. Okay. So back into the text, page 828, in the middle of that paragraph. There's only one paragraph on top of the page. In turn, when compared to a group of unintegrated human individuals to an unintegrated human collective, the divine providence that governs each individual human, the relative shattered tohu in this scenario, is superseded by divine providence that applies to the collective integrated group of humans, relative tikkun. Okay, that was a bit. Let's try to understand that. Okay. So, in other words, I guess if you have a person who's not in the state of what we call shleimut, of the state of perfected integration, but he or she is part of a group that has members that are, so maybe the group as a whole does have its integration. I'm not sure if that's what he's saying. Let me read that again. I am sorry. In turn, when comparing a group of unintegrated human individuals to an unintegrated human collective,
to an integrated
human group collective, the divine providence that governs each individual human, the relative shattered tohu in the scenario, is superseded by the divine providence that applies to the collective integrated human group, the relative tikkun. In other words, there's a saying that says that it's good to join a minyan in prayer, because the minyan in prayer minyan with quorum in prayer, because God will then, even the person's not praying so perfectly, but the prayer will still be carried by those who are, who are praying more strongly. So God can look at a group of people and say, okay, there are some that aren't so IAI, but there are some that are doing very well, and we'll let we're going to judge them by those that are, by those who are doing very well. That's what it kind of sounds like he's talking about. How does it come off to you, Russ?
I'm not sure. It's pretty confusing.
Okay.
But it's trying to, but somehow it's contrasting that with what it said earlier, like saying everything's relative. So it says like when you go in one direction, like the individual takes precedence, and go the other direction, the collective takes precedence. But
right. So, but it's right. So it sounds like, but there could be a relative integration of a collective. That's what it sounds like he's saying. That may not apply to any individual in the collective. Oh, I know a beautiful example of this. Okay, there was a story in the times of Hillel the Elder, where the eve of Passover arrived on Sabbath. And the question was, how are we going to bring the Paschal offering? Because you're not allowed to carry in a public domain on the Sabbath. How are people going to transport their knives for the Paschal offering to carry it? So the Sanhedrin couldn't come up with a solution. So they finally conclude, I think Hillel the Elder, he was the one who mentioned this, that he has a tradition that if the Jewish people are not prophets, they're the children of prophets. And what he meant in this sense was that on the collective, the Jewish people could attain prophecy. Have a sense of what to do on the collective. And they saw that people on their own were transporting their knives, with the sheep carrying the knives, tied between the horns, stuck in the wool of the sheep, of the sheeps and the goats, and so the idea that the collective can have prophecy, even if the individual is incapable of prophecy, is a certain prophecy that the collective of the Jewish people could have. This this is this, I think, speaks to what Avinoam Fraenkel is talking about, that you could have an integration on the collective that does not necessarily exist for the individual, and as a result, the individual can be swept up in the benefits of the collective integration. You hear that? Does that make sense to you, Russ?
Yeah, on some level.
On some level, okay. I think that's what he means. I think it's an example of what he means. So let's continue on. Okay, last sentence on the paragraph of 828. As mankind reaches ever increasing higher levels of parts of integration and emergence, it will therefore enjoy ever increasing levels of specific divine providence. So, in other words, as we grow, spiritually evolve, then each of us individually will feel more and more, direct divine providence. Okay. Cindy says she saw the story as meaning something else. Well, The truth of the matter is the story can have many meanings. It doesn't have to, I was just pointing out to one meaning, but there could be other meanings. And if you'd like to talk to me about it sometime, Cindy, you're welcome to. Okay. Top of 829. It can therefore be concluded that there is a strong basis to argue that Rav Ergas' seemingly contradictory description of divine providence, applying simultaneously to both an absolute and variable level, is not contradictory at all. If related in terms of partsufim, which we discussed earlier, partsufim means, spiritual, integrated spiritual structures that have undergone proper integration. From the perspective of every relatively higher level collective partsuf, which is a relative state of higher linear sfirot and higher state of cosmic repair, it is subject to a higher level of specific divine providence that relates to every aspect of the integrated whole partsuf entity. So, he's reiterating it because he's going to, what he said earlier, because he's going to lead into explaining Rav Ergas. Okay. Because Rav Ergas, remember, he made one statement that sounded like he was in support of general divine supervision. He made another statement which sounded like he was in support of specific divine supervision in his book. So Avinoam Fraenkel is saying, if you look at the Arizal, you can understand that he was speaking in one case, about the general divine supervision of unintegrated entities, which coming from the spherical sfirot. And then he's speaking about, following that, the linear sfirot, which from which comes specific divine supervision. So it depends on what level you're talking about, what level he was talking about at the time. Okay, whereas every relative lower partsuf is a relative state of spherical sfirot and shattered tohu, the shattered sfirot, and only subject to a lower level of specific divine providence, and at its lowest level to general divine supervision as a group, and not on the level of each component entity. So the variability depends on the relative state of tikkun, of cosmic repair, which is subject to human action. On this basis, we said that Rav Ergas's position on divine supervision is fully consistent with that of the Arizal, whose teachings are almost certainly to have been among those that Rav Ergas had in mind when stating his presentation as ascribed to the Kabbalistic works in general, in addition to Sefer Elima that was written by Rav Moshe Cordovero. It can also be argued that the stark differences in positions on divine supervision presented by our rabbis are all words of the living God, which means that they all reconcile. Depends how you're looking at it. Depends what angle is. And these words can be considered to be correct in different scenarios, whether relating to absolute or variable divine providence, to relative lower level of spherical sfirot, shattered tohu, means the reduction to larger whole integrated spiritual structures of the linear sfirot and cosmic repair and emergence. So it depends what level we're talking on. So there's a principle of Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim Chaim. These and those are the words of the living God. And what that means is that the dispute that you see in the Talmudic texts and among how, and throughout our tradition, they are real. They're real disputes, but somehow or another, they all reconcile on a higher plane. On a higher plane, somehow or other, they all reconcile. So he's showing this in Rav Ergas's statements, and he's also showing this within the various earlier sages who had taken either one view or another, either general divine supervision or specific divine supervision. So he's showing it, that there is a reconciliation. It depends which spiritual level we're talking from. If we're talking about from Igulim, the spherical sphirot, or from even further afield, a state of shattered sphirot, then there's general divine supervision. It's, God reveals his supervision on the group level. The individuals don't matter so much, It's like like what you have, that a king cannot rule the country from a position of he knows everything. He doesn't know everything. It's not all integrated in his mind. He has to make general laws that apply to everyone sweepingly, whether or not it's fair for the individual or not. It's that kind of thing. The general, and then there's the specific integrated divine supervision, where it where God, where that's coming from the linear sphirot, from the state of tikkun, where the individuals do count. The individuals' necessities are weighed in, and that's this is why a person needs a tzaddik, a rebbe to go to, because it's not enough what the Torah has its sweeping statements of halacha, but people have individual situations. There needs to be a certain tailoring. So a state of tikkun takes that individual tailoring into consideration. As we go further and further into the Messianic era, there will be more. There'll be more and more levels of Torah, you might say, that will be revealed, and as a result of that being revealed, there'll be more and more capable of handling specific situations. But that's this is part of the process. Okay. So now we're up to another chapter within the section of Hashgacha, divine supervision. I don't know how far we'll get with it today, but we're going to try. We're on page 830. Relative perception and terminology, views, and Hashgacha, Chasadim, and Gevurot. Okay, whatever he's going to say here is going to be built on what he said earlier. So, don't feel intimidated by the language. It is the relative context of Hashgacha, divine supervision, that specifically results in in creations that have differences in perception. 2, in a whole suite of relative Kabbalistic terms. And 3, in different perspectives of a single reality that are related to with these relative terms in different ways. So remember what he means by relative terms. Remember, you could have something that yesterday was considered in a state of tikkun, but because we've advanced, uh, uh, today it's no longer considered tikkun. It's considered actually shattered. It's considered igulim, spherical sphero. It's not considered tikkun anymore. You know, so everything is in relative terms. You know, who are you in your family tree? Are you a child or are you a parent? Well, relative to those who begot you, you're a child. Relative to whom you beget, you're a parent. You know, these are relative roles. Kabbalah, as I said again and again, does not function like the way Talmud does. You know, Kabbalah has a very relativistic side. You need both in life because you know, they're both true in their own way, you know. But when, you know, I'm not saying, you know, I don't want people to think, oh yeah, you know, let's abandon Talmud studies so we can learn Kabbalah, you know, and then we could come up with all these relativistic views of life and be creative that way. No, they're both are necessary. They're you know, and you know, you don't, you know, because even when you're getting relativistic, you got to know what you're getting relativistic about, you know. You know, okay, so we'll say that the sphera of chesed, you know, you know, is on this. This is the sphera of chesed. That is the sphera of chesed. That is the sphera of chesed. Yes, but if there's a this and a that and a that, then each one is somehow different. You know, in a real way. So there is a relativism going on, but there's also, you know, if you know, there's also logical, you know, structure and concrete things going on too. So you have to know how to balance it. Okay. A deep appreciation of this relativistic concept is crucial to enable a proper understanding of many Kabbalistic texts. In the previous section, we saw that the Arizal referred to two relative levels of Ha'ora, Hashgacha, divine providence, in terms of lower level of light that gives us just the most basic existence and subsistence of every creation parts of, preventing it from ceasing to be, and a higher level of light that comes in addition based on the actions of the Partsuf, raising the Partsuf's level of existence and perception to a higher Partsuf level. Okay, again, okay, let's unpack that. What Vergas, I mean, what Avinoam Fraenkel is saying here is that we just learned about what I told you about, that there are two levels of divine supervision. And one, there's the lower level, which is general, and the higher level, which is specific. And therefore, the divine illumination that's going to be in these levels are obviously relatively different. You know, there'll be, you know, that's what the word ha'ora means. Ha'ora means illumination. That's the ha'ora in the sentence. The divine illumination on what's called, when it comes to the general divine supervision, is less, and the divine revelation when it comes to higher supervision is more, when there's more relative integration. The following continuation of the Arizal's teaching is quoted in the previous section, elaborates further. You know, so as it does, as so it also illustrates the synonymous meaning of some important, regularly used pairs of relative Kabbalistic terms such as panim, meaning front or face, achor, meaning back, or yashar, meaning direct light, or choser, meaning returning light, or penimiut, means light of internal essence, and or chitzoniut, which means light of external presentation. Or zachor means masculine light, and or nikeh means feminine light. Some of these terms are used in Shomer Emunim. Rav Ergas countered the misinterpreted Sabbatean application of these terms to physicality by quoting this teaching of the Arizal in its Tzad HaNachash to demonstrate that these terms are not to be understood literally, but are analogously used to relate to non-physical concepts.
What's Sabbatean? Is that
Those are the followers of Shabtai
yeah, that's what I
Tzvi.
thought. Okay.
One of the techniques they would use in order to distort Judaism was to physicalize certain Kabbalistic notions that were meant to be metaphorical, that were meant to be a parable. That was one of their techniques. And a whole thought process over Shabbos about this, walking to Shul Shabbos morning yesterday, where it came, it says that there was a river that came from Eden, and it divided into 4 river heads, right? So they say that what happened with the Arizal's teachings was that it divided into 4 river heads, divided into the Ramchal, the Vilna Gaon, the Rashash, and the Baal Shem Tov HaKodesh Chasidus. And because the level of the generation had dropped, and it could not any longer take it the way the Arizal originally said it. We have a general principle that as generations move further, the lower and lower souls come down into the world, and therefore there's less and less spiritual sensitivity to take in these teachings as whole. They need to be taken more piecemeal and more broken up. So, but if you notice, all these had happened, these 4 approaches to the Arizal's teachings happened after the Shabtai Tzvi movement. Some of them could be directly traced to being reactions of the Shabtai Tzvi movement, like Hasidism and Ramchal for sure. The Vilna Gaon probably, could be traced if you think about it. Rashash, maybe it might be a little harder to trace it, but I'm sure it could be traced if someone wants to do the work. Someone knows Rashash well enough to do that work. And it dawned on me that these approach. What happened was, you see, the Arizal passed away at age 39.
Oh, pretty young.
Very young. He only taught his teachings for a couple of years, and he told his students, that there has to be a lot of peace among you in order to keep me in the world. If there's no peace among you, he said he couldn't stay in the world. And as a result of him not staying in the world, he said his teachings won't be complete. He'll have to come back again in other ways in order to complete his teachings. Well, it was, two wives of his students got into a dispute, and as a result, the Arizal left the world.
Wow.
He got ill and he left the world. And so I have a feeling that because his teachings were not complete, that's why he had left the world. I mean that's why the Shabtai Tzvi was able to happen, because his teachings were not complete. So talking about the Shabtai Tzvi, how they distorted his teachings, and to claim that Shabtai Tzvi is Mashiach, and then later follow him into apostasy, and to justify his apostasy. And I think that the core of this was that the Arizal's teachings weren't complete. And that is why the Arizal's teachings had to come back in 4 different versions and styles. And I understand that great people like Rav Moshe Schatz and Rav Itchamaya Morgenstern and Joey Rosenfeld and possibly Avinoam Fraenkel and others are working to integrate all these 4 streams to bring back the Arizal's teachings in a fuller form. I think that's a huge part of the messianic process as well. Whereas a misunderstanding, what's led to a disruption in a sense of the messianic process. A full understanding will lead to will lead to a peaceful transition into the messianic process. Okay, let's see what Cindy wrote. When people see evidence of personal hashgacha pratit, divine supervision, when one looks back at patterns in their lives and shows Hashem's participation, or when one feels the particular spiritual, where does this fall in the discussion? Divine brothers. Well, again, I believe every human being has personal divine supervision to one extent or another. It's just a question of extent. And I think that that's part of being a human. Part of being human means that you have a certain basic level of integrated consciousness that's going to call for, it's going to draw down a certain level of individual divine providence. But we truthfully don't know how much of what what worked out amazing for us was a result of us individually or as a result of the group that we're a part of. But I do believe that every human being has a certain level of individual divine providence. I just think that comes with God making us B'Tselem Elokim, in the image of God, so to speak. I believe that just comes with the territory. Okay, so I don't know if we're going to go through the entire quote from the Arizal here. I'd rather go skip to his explanation of it, which goes on 833, only because I feel that it's very dense and we'll get more from the actual explanation that we'll get from digging into the quote. We'll get the idea a little bit better this way. Okay, I want to thank everyone who joined today. By the way, did the Clubhouse thing work out? Did anyone join the Clubhouse?
Nobody else joined.
No one joined the Clubhouse. Okay, doesn't seem like. Okay, we'll try it a little more. Maybe. We'll try it a little more. It won't. But ultimately, I think that YouTube is the way to go. Okay. So I want to thank everyone who joined today, and want to thank those who will listen to this class later, and wishing everyone a Shavua Tov Varach, a happy, joyful, and pleasant week on all levels. A week of Hashgacha Pratit, of individual divine supervision that's felt and that is integrated, and leading to even more individual, divine supervision, level after level after level, higher and higher and higher, more and more and more integrated.
Me.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So don't worry, Cindy. You didn't get the clubhouse link, but I fielded your questions here. And anyways, you could always speak to me individually. The clubhouse link is just something we're trying, Cindy. We don't know if we're going to stay with it. We're just opening an opportunity. We don't know if it's even good for the technology because it might lead to feedback. So, just so it's not I don't envision it at the moment as the main show. It's kind of like just a backdoor for people who can't connect other ways. Okay. Anyways, everyone, Shavua Tov Varach. Okay, take care. Bye.
So feedback wasn't an issue because it was only going one way.
Right.
And it could be because we start